Picture a 30-day experiment in which you treat breathing as the only lever you pull. No mantras taped to the mirror, no crystal grids, just the deliberate rhythm of inhaling and exhaling as a metronome between inner state and outer events. During the first 4 or 5 days, the gains are almost purely biological. Sleep becomes deeper, digestion steadier, and resting tension drops. You could measure it with a watch that tracks heart rate variability, yet even without gadgets you notice that background restlessness quiets by a third. The nervous system is receiving proof that danger is not present, so the fight or flight dial eases toward neutral. By the second week, the benefit shifts from physiology to perception. You begin to catch small, favorable turns that used to slip by unacknowledged. Traffic lights synchronized, the email that normally drags arrives with a courteous tone, the colleague who avoided conversation is suddenly willing to help. None of it is mystical. It is your reticular activating system filtering for possibilities instead of threats. The only requirement is to register these micro-events without labeling them signs from the universe. The more ordinary they feel, the faster the brain accepts them as the new baseline. Mid-month you introduce brief carbon dioxide tolerance drills. They are not breath holds that make you dizzy, just an exhalation 2 seconds longer than usual and a passive pause before air returns. That slight rise in CO2 dilates cerebral vessels and nudges the vagus nerve, telling the heart it can safely beat a little slower. A slower heart reads as safety, and safety frees cognitive bandwidth for imagery. Visualization performed in that chemistry, calm, oxygen-rich, vaguely toned, does not require cinematic graphics. A soft focus scene is enough. You signing a contract, you walking calmly into a new apartment, you speaking with unforced confidence. The essential ingredient is coherence. The body must feel permitted to inhabit that scene now, not someday. When breath is tranquil, the primal brain quiets and passes the microphone to the cortex that can imagine without interference. If one afternoon the mind races or an old worry resurfaces, you meet it with the simplest physical cue: attention to the diaphragm pressing downward as air enters, and a slow release as if an inner zipper opens. 2 or 3 of these sigh-like cycles lower cortisol spikes and drain momentum from spiraling thought. It is not a heroic intervention. It is maintenance, like smoothing a wrinkle before it becomes a knot. Around day 20 awareness widens further. Payments that were stuck in processing clear. Invitations that suit your goals surface unprompted. The explanation stays ordinary. When the nervous system feels open, micro-choices, tone of voice, timing of replies, the instinct to leave for work 5 minutes later, shift. Those micro-choices rearrange chains of cause and effect that later look like luck. The 4th week is about keeping the groove without turning it into autopilot. 6 slow cycles per session, twice a day, morning and late afternoon, are plenty. If a day crowds out one session, you skip it without guilt. Anxiety about missing practice would restore the stress chemistry you just disarmed. The vital point is presence, noticing whether you are still breathing with intention or have slipped back to shallow autopilot. When you catch the slide, you devote 15 conscious seconds to one deliberate breath and resume whatever you were doing. Course corrected. What about the promise of instant manifestation? Instant does not mean atoms rearrange on command. It means the internal state that steers perception shifts the moment you exhale tension. Physical reality is slower, but the decision that allows it to change happens in less than a heartbeat. On day 30 you look back and gather data, measurable or intuitive. Deeper sleep, calmer moods during situations that used to trigger you, an unexpected payment, a conversation that opened a path you had considered closed. Those data points are not trophies. They are evidence for the rational part of the brain. The next time doubt whispers, you have facts to answer with instead of slogans. From here the cycle repeats with less cognitive effort. Neural circuits that once defaulted to hypervigilance have been pruned. The new resting frequency already favors clarity over contraction. Breathing will keep happening 24 hours a day. All you are doing is steering something inevitable so that every inhale becomes nutrition and every exhale a vote for the reality you prefer. The world outside will continue to demand emails, deadlines, school runs, and unexpected phone calls. None of that contradicts the practice. It provides the testing ground where regulated breath proves its worth. If skepticism surfaces, your own or someone else's, return to the kernel. 20,000 breaths pass through you daily. Directing a handful of them is not one more task. It is reclaiming authorship over a process already writing the script of your chemistry, your focus, and by extension the opportunities you notice or ignore. That is why breath-led manifestation is both the simplest and the most overlooked method available. It costs nothing, requires no special setting, and walks with you into every boardroom, kitchen, and late-night worry. So you keep breathing. You keep noticing. You keep letting the quiet between breaths remind your body that it is safe to imagine something better and safe to receive it when it comes. That is all the engine needs. True integration begins when the exercise leaves the cushion and follows you into ordinary movements. Walking to the grocery store becomes an experiment in cadence. 4 silent steps on the inhale, 6 on the exhale. Not because numbers are magical, but because counting anchors awareness in the ribcage instead of the to-do list. A crowded checkout line turns into laboratory conditions. Rather than tap your foot and feed the pulse of impatience, you settle the diaphragm, feel its dome descend, and notice that the mind's urgency collapses with the next slow exhale. The line moves at the same speed, yet experience of time softens. A demonstration that breath alters perception before it alters anything external. Negotiations and difficult conversations are the next frontier. Most people enter them armor-clad, holding the breath high in the chest, ready to fire rebuttals. If you begin with one understated belly breath, no audible sigh, just a downward press that widens the lower ribs, the vagus nerve signals safety to the brainstem. Safety widens cognitive bandwidth. You hear the subtext behind the other person's words, catch nuances that hyperarousal would miss, and respond from strategy rather than reflex. What looks like poise to outsiders is simply a nervous system that refuses the invitation to fight or flight. There will be setbacks. An unexpected bill, a partner's sharp remark, a news headline, any of these can hijack breathing in an instant. The point is not to maintain perfect coherence but to shorten recovery time. The moment you realize breath has crawled back to the collarbones, you intervene. One lengthened exhalation, a pause short enough to feel carbon dioxide rise but not long enough to induce strain, and the diaphragm reclaims its rhythm. Each micro-recovery trains the subconscious to treat calm as the default rather than the exception. After several months, a secondary effect appears. Impulses become easier to navigate. Cravings for sugar, doom scrolling, or late-night emailing feed on the jittery chemistry of shallow respiration. When that chemistry quiets, the cravings lose urgency. Willpower is still required, but it is no longer a duel, more like guiding a child than wrestling an equal opponent. This is not mystical discipline. It is a side effect of balanced blood gases and a prefrontal cortex relieved from constant emergency mode. A reminder about tempo. Deeper does not mean maximal lung inflation, nor does slower mean pushing prolonged retentions. The body interprets extremes as stress. The sweet spot is the edge where breath feels unhurried yet unforced, where the pause is a gentle comma, not a held-back sentence. If dizziness appears, the practice has crossed that edge. You simply return to a comfortable rhythm until equilibrium restores. Some practitioners worry that focusing on breath will dull its automaticity. The concern is unfounded. Autonomic control resumes the moment attention drifts. What deliberate practice does is expand the range within which that automatic regulation happens. Think of it as upgrading a thermostat so the house stays comfortable across wider seasons. Eventually, breath becomes a barometer for unseen variables. You sense conversations, places, even digital spaces that constrict respiration and those that let it unfurl. This detection is not psychic. It is interoception, the brain reading internal signals that register microstress before conscious thought does. Following that barometer steers you toward environments and relationships that support your baseline frequency, which in turn accelerates the manifestation spiral. Low-tension physiology - broader perception - wiser choices - external conditions that mirror the new internal state. None of this promises immunity from grief, shock, or the ordinary pains of being human. It promises competence. When loss arrives, breathing skills keep the nervous system from tipping into learned helplessness. When opportunity knocks, They prevent self-sabotage by keeping vigilance at a level where excitement is energizing rather than overwhelming. In both directions, breath acts as the hinge, silent, portable, free. So the experiment continues beyond 30 days, folding into years, perhaps a lifetime. You will still draft goals, send applications, rehearse presentations. Manifestation is not passive, but those acts are less frantic because the ground they stand on is steadier. Breath remains the metronome. Inhalation greeting the moment, exhalation releasing the need to control every branch of its unfolding. Results will differ in shape and timeline, yet the underlying pattern repeats with mathematical reliability. Coherent respiration leads to coherent perception, and coherent perception selects realities that match its own clarity. Keep returning to that pattern. If theory seduces you into complexity, notice the next breath. If disappointment tightens the chest, lengthen the exhale by a count or two. Each return is a vote cast for the version of life that aligns with ease rather than struggle. Over time, the ballot box fills in your favor and the outer scene adjusts accordingly, not because the universe has been persuaded by louder affirmations, but because it is reflecting the quiet authority of a nervous system that finally remembers how to breathe on purpose.